¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
If you used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based techniques teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world, with lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers. Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/Spotify. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify. Rules and restrictions may apply.
How do I do it all during the holidays? 4 words. Shipt Same Day Delivery. With Shipt, I can order groceries from Albertsons, decor from Michael's, even gifts for my furry friend from PetSmart. Plus, my personal shopper brings everything I need that same day. That makes it a breeze to decorate, get my shopping done, and make time for all the holiday parties. Do it all this holiday season with Shipt. Download the app or visit shipt.com. That's SHIPT.com.
You are tuned in to the Foul Weather Podcast, the forecast to your next successful hunt. Coming to you from the home office, Jack's Reef, New York.
What will this fall and winter season bring? Will it be ducky, or will we be in another lull until January? Find out today in the first of 2 long-term weather severity forecasts. The Foul Weather Podcast team digs deep into the data that predicts our winter weather and timing and intensity of your duck migration. That in your weekly duck migration forecast, all this week on the Foul Weather Podcast. Hey, a quick reminder to rate, follow, like, and share the Foul Weather Podcast to get all the latest updates on our exclusive duck migration forecast each Monday morning throughout season, plus all of our informative content throughout the year. Be the guy with the real information about the ducks and where the ducks are at. I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. We thank our every week listeners. You know who you are. Those that never miss a single migration forecast episode each Monday morning. Y'all are as ate up as me about ducks, duck biology, and duck migration. You know where the ducks are at before the ducks know where they're at. Think about that. You know where the ducks are at before the ducks even know where they are at. Our dedicated weekly listeners can pick the best days to hunt because the Foul Weather Podcast forecasts fresh ducks hot from the north. Shoot the ducks from the north before they know where they're at. I'm your host, DrMike, coming to you from the home office in Jack's Reef. Well, our first split came and went locally by the farm. We can still spend some time driving to other zones to duck hunt, but for now, the worst first split of our 13 years at the farm has come and gone. It's really just a result of epic drought, but it did allow us to get work done with a landowner last week and seed in some really nice water plantain, arrowhead, and Walter's millet that with high hopes will germinate next year and provide additional benefits for hungry ducks and hunters hungry for ducks hanging over their blinds. So it is not lost on me that if right now I lived until I'm 80, which with my fast-paced life is probably pushing it, but it is not lost on me that I could likely have less than, 30 years of opening days of duck season left in my life. Even if I could hunt every year up until I die, heck, what a dream that would be, still doing all this when I'm 80. Anyhow, this is a comment of we should cherish, every year, have no regrets. I do regret a bit not working harder in the first split to get out more, but I'm also picking my battles. The buck we dropped is cut up and in the freezer, and we've been putting up pheasants with Jaeger instead of competing with others for limited water and space to duck hunt, and trying to generally fight the fight where the fight is right. So every year's different, and to me, that is what makes duck hunting so much more exciting than I'd say other forms of hunting. Yeah, there's different deer, and you can, name them and watch them on cameras. And for us, the week of Thanksgiving is a great time to get together with family and friends over deer hunting. But it's still kind of the same old each year, tipping over boring brown squares. The pheasants are in the grass each year. The grouse numbers go up and down. You shoot them or at them, normally miss for the grouse. The turkeys are tempting, but that game of cat and mouse has a fairly carbon copy feel to it, once you get good at it. And that's even if, there are turkeys around. A lot of turkey hunting nowadays for me, and I think a lot of people, is just beating feet just to even find them. So nothing against all other types of hunting. My wife and I partake in all those things we noted, and we put in plenty of hours for each. But duck hunting really is different and special. And the weather around it, I feel, is different and special. The wind blows differently. The marshes change drastically from one year to the next. The ducks come at different times depending on that year's weather, the snow, ice, and rains. Those are often tough to predict way out. And the numbers of ducks, ebbs and flows. Some years you have wood ducks right through to November in the north, and some years they've blown out on a hard frost early in October. Sometimes the mallards come down from Canada in November, but increasingly for us, they're showing up in good numbers in December. Most years, we aren't even sure the canvasbacks will make it down from Lake St. Clair and the upper Mississippi River to us. Each year is different, and we must do with it what we can. And I say, it is what it is, right? I'm looking forward to more great hunts this year, but it is unlikely to beat last year, which had us at around 70 birds already at this time. I mean, okay, we did travel to hunt, but, we were also shooting ducks fairly regularly at home, too. One thing is for sure, I'm not giving up on ducks anytime soon, and I'm certain that I have more opening days in the rear view than the road ahead. Think about that. So if you're one of our older lads on here, cherish every opening day. And heck, if you're the young ones, before you know it, you're going to have more opening days of duck season in the rear view than the road ahead. So cherish every opening day, folks. We all live for it. Up next, we dive right into factors that we use to shape our long-term duck migration forecast. So please stick with us. Beckman Game Calls has it dialed in. If you want a duck call that is adjustable to your air pressure and sounds like a duck, this is it. I've blown a ton of different calls in my life, but this one is the real deal. Look, we don't endorse just anything. We are only going to put forward a call that works. The Edison by Chris Beckman of Beckman Game Calls? Yeah, this beauty sounds like a duck. I only know of one published research paper focused on what makes a duck call sound like a duck. Go look me up, and you will see that colleagues and I have the only paper published in scientific literature about what makes a duck call sound like a duck. For sure, Chris Beckman did his homework, and this call sounds like a duck. This guy knows how to make a duck call, period. But don't just take my word for it. Here's the proof. First, a hen recording, and then the Edison in the big woods of Arkansas. Visit them today at BeckmanGameCalls.com. All right, now I know we've gone through a bunch of this before, but for our new listeners, I'd like to recap what factors the foul weather team uses to make our long-term forecasts. First and foremost, we use the Snow Advance Index by Dr. Judah Cohen. Judah and I first published a paper several years ago that showed the Snow Advance Index does well to predict duck migration during El Niño and La Niña events, but not so well during neutral conditions. But we do have La Niña conditions present right now in the Pacific, so we are leaning on it a bit for this year's long-term forecast. The Snow Advance Index is basically the rate at which snow cover advances across western Siberia during October. This area, when it is heavily snow-covered by the end of October, sets up a cold, high-pressure system that causes a wavy jet stream across the northern hemisphere and disrupts the polar vortex. Remember that the polar vortex is the tight spinning of cold air near the North Pole, and what we want is a wavy jet stream that causes polar vortex disruptions. So when folks say we have a strong polar vortex, they really mean a substantial polar vortex disruption, because a strong polar vortex is technically cold spinning tightly near the North Pole and not pushing into mid-latitudes. In contrast, polar vortex disruptions lead to cold air pouring out of the Arctic and cold temperatures and potentially snow, leading to strong southward duck migration. We also watch Arctic sea ice in specific areas because an open ocean can lead to more Arctic snow. This is just like lake effect snow, say in Buffalo, New York, kind of near where I'm from and family farm and all that's from. When Lake Erie stays open to the west of Buffalo, New York, cold air can sweep over the lake, picking up moisture on the west and southwest wind and dropping it in the form of snow over Buffalo. But once Lake Erie freezes, the snow for Buffalo generally slows or stops completely. That is why most of Buffalo snow happens earlier in the winter before the lake freezes, whereas in the Syracuse area or near Jack's Reef, where the home office is here, we usually get snow with a northwest wind coming off of Lake Ontario. And because Lake Ontario is 800 feet deep and relatively south compared to other Great Lakes, it rarely freezes completely, and often Syracuse gets its greatest lake effect snow later in winter. Anyhow, the Arctic works the same way. If the poles are not ice covered, it can produce these greater amounts of snow and these cold and high pressure systems in just the right place to disrupt the polar vortex with a wavy jet stream. Ooh. At a shorter scale, we look to the Arctic Oscillation Index, which is the difference in pressure between the northern hemisphere Arctic and mid-latitudes. In the positive phase, there's low pressure over the Arctic and high pressure over the mid-latitudes. The jet stream is farther north and stronger. Cold air is contained in the polar region, resulting in milder winters in the mid-latitudes, and storms are pushed farther north, so we get less snow towards the southern latitudes. In the negative phase of the Arctic Oscillation Index, high pressure over the Arctic and low pressure over the mid-latitudes happens. The jet stream weakens and shifts south. There's a southward shift of cold air that penetrates into the mid-latitude, leading to colder winters, and storms or snow events are more common at mid-latitudes. That's something that we can predict really well out to like 7 days. So that's something that's used a lot in our winter weather forecasts that we look at even beyond what the kind of weatherman produces, right? As far as highs, lows, and when it's going to snow. Further, the influence of La Nina and El Nino are overlaid on all the above factors as well. But they're really only in control when strong conditions occur in the Pacific and sea surface temperatures are abnormally below, that normal temperature. That's a La Nina. Or sea surface temperatures are abnormally warmer than normal. That's the El Nino. Further, how strong the effect is on our duck migration weather depends on how long we've been in La Nina and El Nino, as well as the relative strength of them, like how much warmer than normal or how much colder than normal is it. For this year, we just entered La Nina conditions, and we are likely to be out of those conditions by the 3-month period of January, February, March, and possibly back to neutral conditions even for December, January, and February time period. Right now, most forecasters are leaning, in my opinion, too heavily on the La Nina for the bulk of their long-term forecast. So those are the things we use. So up next, the forecast for your duck season, weather, and duck migration for all 4 North American flyways. So please, stick with me. How many days have you had empty skies over the duck blind? Your property can be more with Wildlife Strategies. It is no secret that hiring a consultant, an expert in managing water, woods, and fields, an expert in duck food, an expert in hunting pressure management. Hiring a consultant yields better habitat for the critters you chase. Less empty skies, more quality days of field, more smiles for miles with family and friends. If that's your game and goal, contact Ryan Delaney at ryan@farmlg.com for a site visit. Okay, and we are back with your long-term forecast. First, this is our 3rd year of producing this forecast, and we make it very duck-specific. So please understand that how we interpret the coming fall and winter weather is much different than you get from NOAA, the Voodoo of the Farmer's Almanac, or whatever webpage you've looked at. Understand that a lot of winter weather happens in February and March at northern latitudes because the planet continues to cool well beyond the shortest day of the year, December 20th, well beyond the winter solstice. This is also why it makes no sense for ducks to rely solely on photoperiod or day length, because weather and day length are not perfectly coupled. So ducks adjust their migration based on weather. Many adjust their timing of migration a lot based on weather, like mallards. Point is that the timing of weather events really matters for duck migration to the right places at the right time. It also matters that we get snow and cold for the prairies to rejuvenate the number of ponds in the prairie pothole region for breeding ducks. That type of weather, that type of snow can even come in February and March, which does not affect this duck season for your migration, but it would really influence future years' duck populations, which is the precursor to a good duck season. Of course, we need to get the weather to make them move south as well at the right time. When the stars align against us, like winter 23-24 2 winters ago, with low duck populations, a strong El Nino, and warm without snow and drought conditions in many places, it makes for a really rough season. When the population is high and weather moves progressively south, getting ducks to mid-latitudes in good numbers by December, and then to the south by at least Christmas, we're in a lot better situation. And remember, 1 or 2 cold snaps does not make a winter where ducks move south in abundance, and typically mallards just sit those out because they just don't last long enough. That is why the Weather Severity Index that we produce is about cumulative days of cold and snow that it has built into it. Anyhow, if you're interested in how well our predictions worked out last year, check out episode 75, La Nina What? The Duck Season Recap. And from 2 years ago, episode 29, Where Were the Ducks? All right, so here we go. We are going to go month by month and then talk about differences among flyways and generalize about the likelihood of movement by early migrating ducks like green-winged teal, widgeon, shoveler, gadwall, and pintail, and contrast that with the hardier ducks like mallards and black ducks. The final numbers on the Snow Advance Index are not in yet. That is why we also produce a second updated long-term seasonal forecast later in November. But right now, it is looking like it is in the top 4 since 2015 and well above the long-term average. So the snow has really moved well across Siberia, lots of snow cover, and this bodes well for polar vortex disruptions. Now, it really depends on the timing of them. There is a really good chance of a major disruption in November this year for the prairies, Midwest, and over into the Great Lakes region and Northeast U.S., but we will caveat that this is about a 50% chance, but that is still much above normal for November. Overall, the Foul Weather Podcast data crunching kind of, the models kind of agree with each other that there will be some cold outbreaks and short-lived but intense snowfall events in December, but that January snowfall will be well below normal for most of the central Mississippi and Atlantic flyways, which with much lower than normal snow in the east. The city of Buffalo, I'm going to pick on this one, is an exception with at least 1 or 2 above normal early snowfall events, lake effect stuff. This may repeat itself in a few isolated lake effect regions like Michigan across to other spots of New York, Ohio, and such in that time of December, but it won't be widespread enough snowfall to really push mallards south in abundance in December. The good news for duck habitat is that snowfall in January through the prairie region, and especially into February and March, is predicted to be above normal. The same is expected for much of Canada, but as we proceed into the U.S., other than kind of like the western mountains region, everything else at lower elevations is predicted to have lower than normal snowfall for February and March. Again, other than a nice swath across the Dakotas and a bit into kind of northern to central Minnesota and Wisconsin. This is all that La Nina stuff, folks. So that's your really focused area. You're going to get this snow in the Canadian prairies and up across Canada, and then down into the U.S. prairies a little bit across the upper Midwest. And then other than that, it's going to be spotty lake effect stuff for the rest of the Great Lakes region. Looking to the Pacific Flyway, January looks like a snow and cold temperature blast, especially in the Pacific Northwest, which is predicted to have above average snow and below average temperatures. So all good for duck migration. Okay, that's the general pattern, but now let's go kind of flyway by flyway. The Pacific is a slam dunk this year. We expect a quality duck migration all around, better than years past, with on-time early duck migration and good movements of mallards in December, with additional waves of migration into January. All around, probably the best duck migration year folks have seen in years. Of course, we're sticking our neck out here, but all indications suggest that stars have aligned to produce a quality duck migration for the Pacific Flyway this year. It should contrast greatly against the other 3 flyways this year for consistency and timing of migration. I tell you, the 3 pintail limit should really pay off for folks in California this year. We're going to lump the Central and Mississippi Flyway together in this long-term forecast, but the eastern portions of the Mississippi Flyway might look a bit more like the Atlantic Flyway forecast, like Ohio, parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, and stuff like that. If we get the polar vortex disruption in November, then we expect an excellent migration of early migrants into lower latitudes earlier than the last couple years. However, weather events won't be enough to move a lot of mallards early. That will happen a bit more into December with 1 to 2 cold blasts, but the reality is that the snow cover is unlikely to come at a pace and over a long enough period to move those mallards in great abundance into the lower latitudes. That is, mallards are going to continue to be spread out at about the latitude of Colorado to Ohio throughout winter. The northern folks will do well to hunt the weather days with wind and cold, and the mid-latitude folks will pick up their mallards at a normal pace, about the same as the last few years, but they get stale really quick. Our southern folks, they will have some mallards, but it will continue to be slim like past years. January really looks like a bust. With warming temperatures, a January thaw, lots of things like lake effect snow in narrow bands in the Great Lakes region. The prairies will be locked up, but the mid-latitudes will continue without snow, and mallards will be pretty sticky in enough places to make it tough mallard hunting for lots of folks in the south. That, coupled with low numbers of ducks, suggests that focusing on the early migrants, non-mallard ducks, will be the best bet for many. Not like mallards don't exist, but they are not going to be as abundant as you want, only in good spots with good habitat and where disturbance is kept at a minimum. Also remember that, your expectations for the season also have to be grounded in the fact that duck numbers are genuinely down. Keeping disturbance down, not hunting every day, and picking potential flight days in the Central and Mississippi flyways will be key this year more than ever. Great flight days of early ducks will be the norm, but fresh mallards hot from the north will be limited. They are likely to be mostly trickle days in December, but in January it looks like a bust for any abundance of flight days from the north. Mostly metering your pressure and letting ducks build up will be key this year for satisfaction in the numbers of ducks you see and shooting opportunities. Up next, the Atlantic Flyway long-term forecast, and then your duck migration forecast for the week. The Farmland Group is your one-stop shop for real estate brokerage, consulting, management, lending, and appraisal across Arkansas, Mississippi, Missouri, Louisiana, Georgia, Tennessee, and growing. Contact them today at farmlg.com. Hey, I'm telling you, do not hesitate because these folks are busy buying, selling, and providing consulting and management strategies that build value into your portfolio on your land. So get in the queue today. Get on their radar. Get on their books. Man, y'all won't be disappointed. Contact the Farmland Group today at farmlg.com. That's farmlg.com. In the Atlantic Flyway, we expect genuinely mild conditions through November and into December. There is that possibility of a cold and snowy front right around Thanksgiving. Of course, higher elevation snow in the eastern mountains will happen, but that isn't duck habitat anyway. It is expected that Quebec and northern Ontario to have cold and snow events that push mallards into the Great Lakes marshes in November, but they won't trickle even into the latitude of New York in abundance until mid-December at best. The early ducks continue to be widespread throughout the Great Lakes region and as far south as North Carolina, with a weirdly warm but drought-stricken year in the east. Overall, ducks are chasing habitat and leaving pressured areas. Nothing about the Atlantic Flyway suggests a normal migration this year because of the drought at the northern parts of the Flyway. As we move into winter and rains continue to pour into the northeast U.S. and eastern Canada, the pressures of habitat will lessen and the influence of weather will start to prevail. As we enter December, the likelihood of early ducks leaving the mid-Atlantic decreases. They will have water, habitat, and mild weather. Our southern folks in the Atlantic Flyway are likely to struggle this year with ducks. Generally, they're going to ball up in abundance in these quality wetlands in the mid-Atlantic region where there's lots of food and lots of water. When we get way down the Atlantic Flyway, they also generate ducks from the mid-continent. We're talking like South Carolina and such. So they should watch major systems in the weather systems in the Mississippi Flyway, especially around Michigan. That may push ducks their way. Of course, the Foul Weather Podcast will have our finger on the pulse of those events and will report them weekly if they happen. Unfortunately, though, for the Atlantic Flyway folks, mild temperatures and lack of snow dominate in January until February and March. Ramps up those weather systems and pounds the kind of New York, New England region with good snowy conditions. That's really probably when these sudden stratospheric warming events are going to happen, which causes a polar vortex disruption. So our weather is probably going to come February and March. So it'll be enough to refill those wetlands and produce good breeding conditions, but not enough to move ducks early. But if your focus is big ducks and diving ducks, they trickle into New York, New England region during November and early December, and it's predicted that they get sticky in that region through December. Cold events will happen, but not enough to push those hardy mallards and black ducks out. And remember, if it gets cold for a little bit, don't hunt the front, hunt the thaw. Rain is key for folks in this region too, and finding floodwaters to hold birds is going to be difficult this year. Weather may not influence migration as much as ducks simply moving around regionally to find good water with good food. If you scout within a few hour region of your house, you're likely to find ducks on food, but you better be in the know. Okay, so that's a lot of specifics that may or may not come true, but the reality is that we are likely in a better position weather-wise across all 4 flyways than we have been for a fair number of years now, right? That does not apply to everyone that you're just going to have ducks. If you have bad habitat with no duck food, you just aren't going to shoot ducks. If you shoot your blind every day with bad food, you just aren't going to shoot ducks. If you shoot your blind every day with great food, it might be okay. If you shoot your blind sparingly with great food, you're probably going to be satisfied, right? Think about that. I repeat, if you have bad habitat with no duck food, you just aren't going to shoot ducks. If you shoot your blind every day with very little duck food, you just aren't going to shoot ducks. If you shoot your blind every day with great duck food, it's going to be okay. But if you find a way to shoot your blind sparingly and have great food, you're likely to see more ducks, shoot at more ducks, and be more satisfied. The matrix of food and pressure that ducks see is real, and they don't want to die. Sitting in your blind every day with no duck food and hoping for the dumb flight ducks is great. But you have a lot of control over this stuff, really more than you know. You know, we report on fresh ducks hot from the north with this proven algorithm, and that for sure is very often our best duck hunting days of the year. But you control a lot of the equation. Find the time to leave them be and build up. Public land has become a zoo, and it is increasingly important to go on the best days to hunt when those fresh ducks arrive. On private ground, the lease, the duck club, the metering of pressure is more manageable. So follow our forecast to shoot those ducks hot from the north, but also, give them a break sometimes. Anyhow, the long-term forecast is, and it's a 2 to 3 month project to produce, so we're happy to have brought it to y'all again. All our great people across Duck Country, USA. And don't forget that we update this long-term forecast later for our following, especially our southern folks. When the December and January weather that affects duck migration becomes more clear, when we have more confidence, we're going to bring you another one. So please share and check back in a few weeks. By a few weeks from now, the snow advance index and the Arctic ice, that stuff will have played out more, and we'll have more definitive answer about what atmospheric circulations and what your winter weather is going to look like. So, up next, our duck migration forecast for the week. Beckman Game Calls has it dialed in. If you want a duck call that is adjustable to your air pressure and sounds like a duck, this is it. I've blown a ton of different calls in my life, but this one is the real deal. Look, we don't endorse just anything. We are only going to put forward a call that works. The Edison by Chris Beckman of Beckman Game Calls? Yeah, this beauty sounds like a duck. I only know of one published research paper focused on what makes a duck call sound like a duck. Go look me up, and you will see that colleagues and I have the only paper published in scientific literature about what makes a duck call sound like a duck. For sure, Chris Beckman did his homework, and this call sounds like a duck. This guy knows how to make a duck call, period. But don't just take my word for it. Here's the proof. First, a hen recording, and then the Edison in the big woods of Arkansas. Visit them today at BeckmanGameCalls.com. Hey, just a quick reminder that we do have that Foul Weather Podcast by Beckman Game Call in the Edison edition with that sharp Foul Weather Podcast logo. Most of them are gone, so if you want to show your support of the Foul Weather Podcast and get one of these great Beckman Game Calls, innovative cut-down calls, we only produce 30 of these, and most of them are gone. So get yours today at BeckmanGameCalls.com. All right, I tell you, the amount of time scouring data sets and crunching it all to get us to the point of that first long-term forecast is really substantial, right? We may be right about the long-term weather, we might be wrong, but most of the time we get it done and we get it right, enough to inform our great friends across duck country. You know, just like our weekly duck migration forecast, we ain't perfect with this long-term forecast either, but if you had a 50-50 chance of a good, time during the week to hunt or a month to plan a trip, we move that easily to 75% chance of getting it right. From a business perspective, if I had a 75% chance of winning every single time, I'd bet on it every time over and over and over and all over again. The weekly duck migration forecast is based on 7-day weather forecasts, which nowadays are 80 to 90% accurate depending on the location and time of year. So we apply our weather severity index algorithms and then predict migration. Will ducks move into or out of your area? Will it be a migration day? What is the best day to hunt in each flyway? We forecast ducks hot from the north. But hey, we are really starting to get into the peak of duck seasons, for most of us. Some places are, into their splits, some are opening, and folks in the south are really looking forward to that kind of Thanksgiving opener for a lot of y'all. Folks in the north are looking forward to the mallards and black ducks and divers. The folks in the mid-latitudes have a bunch of early wimpy ducks. The mallards are sticky to the north, but coming. They are obviously spread out, but still hanging north. The south is waiting on the opener and hoping for that December push. Nobody wants mallard movement in mid-January, if we can help it. But all right, what does this week have in store for all of us? I think I really want to pause here. We felt like we had a product that duck hunters across duck country love, and we're amazed by the outpouring of listenership and support. We've really grown and grown at the Foul Weather Podcast, but we have great aspirations for really helping make your duck hunting experience better and better than ever before. So stick with us through what I'll call this grand duck hunting adventure, that we all know really enriches our lives. But all right, enough sentimental BS. What does the week have in store? What is the duck migration forecast? Last week, we predicted a movement of greenwings, widgeon, and shoveler into the upper Midwest, and that is what we got, with Iowa showing a 58, 55, and 74% increase in those species respectively. Gadwall are slightly hardier, and we didn't predict much movement for them, and they only went up about 17%, so a trickle there. Anyhow, let's actually start with mallards this week in this week's migration forecast. In the west, we will continue to see mallards push south with declining weather conditions and increasing weather severity. Washington State should pick up some birds, especially late in the week. As we move to the central flyway, the story is pretty much the same. Parkland mallards will be on the move into the U.S. prairies late in the week from Friday night into Saturday, Saturday being kind of the best bet for a push. As we move to the Mississippi and Atlantic flyway, mallards and black ducks are, again, sticky all week. For sure, like some have trickled into southern latitudes, and even the deep south has a few mallards, but not in any great abundance yet. Remember that we've had a really warm October and some drought conditions that likely made ducks really push farther south in search of water than they normally would. Those with the capacity to pump water to the surface right now at mid-latitudes are probably covered up with ducks, and those folks in the south that caught some water with these recent rains are likely seeing more ducks than normal compared to the past few years, even some mallards. Next, pintails are really looking to be on the move this week in the west. So Washington, Oregon, and even Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and even some of these pintails are drifting as far south as California. All y'all should be on the lookout for fresh pintails this week. Again, late in the week into the weekend is the best bet for flight days of pintails in the west. For the central flyway, a small movement of pintails out of the latitude of North Dakota, but likely not needing to go any farther south than South Dakota, is predicted by the WSI. Again, these are late week movements, and some of them might overshoot that South Dakota range. So be on the lookout. I'd say as far south as Missouri for a movement of pintails. For the Mississippi Flyway, pintails are also looking to build in the upper Midwest and potentially an increase in the coming week for the Illinois River Valley, with additional pintails kind of pushing over the prairies and into that region. Over in the Atlantic Flyway, consistent and heavy rains and mild temperatures will likely hold most pintails at their current locations for the week. For all the rest of the ducks, there is no real day that sticks out. Mostly late in the week like the other ducks, but they're going to start moving more so midweek, I'd say Wednesday-ish, on persistent west-northwest winds. I'd expect all mid-latitude areas to pick up green-winged teal, widgeon, and shoveler, with gadwall increasing to a lesser extent and more towards the end of the week. So all around, if I was going to have a best bet day this week, it's a weekend warrior week, folks, with Saturday being your best bet. But if you don't want to fight the crowds, give Friday a try, especially if you have local conditions like wind, broken clouds, and declining pressure to help get ducks moving locally. My friends across duck country, we are working our way into the thick of duck season. Thanks for being with us today for our first long-term forecast. Thanks for listening, and as always, may your skies be filled and shoot straight, my friends.